Hey, it's me, Trevor, and today we're going to take a dive back into the oceans of Flitterwatt to see what the three body plans diverged into in the last 100 million years. And in the next episode, we'll follow how they make the unprecedented transition onto land. So the first species we're going to look at here today are the Protocordons, which spend almost all of their time hunting for Lysters to eat, as they are the apex predator in their environment. They live in a very similar way to the sharks of Earth. Now, our next animal is the Proto-Angliform, which branched off from the Protocens, and these live in much the same way as crabs do on Earth, minus the benthic detritivore part. They scavenge carrion and the filter-feeding Jotons. Now, as previously mentioned, these two algae groups will most likely support vast amounts of filter feeders, and it will also form the basis of virtually every ecosystem present on this planet. So the next animal is the Jotus maxis, which evolved from the original Joton, and it's still the same old filter feeder, except now it has the ability to retract into its protective shell to avoid being eaten by its predators. So our next animal is Jotus monos, which split off from Jotons along with Jotus maximus. And this is a motile filter feeder. It moves along the seafloor in much the same way an octopus does, and it filter feeds in much the same way that whales do. So our next animal, the Laitis, is a descendant of the Lysters, and they live in much the same way as worms, eating nutrients in the soil. And the earth animal that they would be analogous to are the ancient aquatic worms of the Cambrian period.
One eternity later.
50 million years later arose the Filtiform, which evolved originally from the Protocordons, and they feed on large clouds of algae, but they avoid competition with the descendants of Jotus monos simply by living in different environments and feeding in different ways. And plus, Jotus monos is more general in its feeding, eating both algae and organic detritus, whereas Filtiform is not. So the next species that evolved from the Protocordons are the Procords, which are ambush predators that don't have water in their mouth, but when they open it, the air inside becomes displaced and thus creates a suction, like some species of bass do to catch other fish on Earth, and they use this suction method to capture Jotons and eat them whole. So our next animal is going to be the Lyrisaform, which evolved from the Proto-Angliforms, and they started attaching themselves to the bodies of larger animals for transport, and also started eating the organic debris that would fall on these animals, which led to them accidentally opening up cuts or scars on the animals. And blood is actually a great source of nutrients, so that pretty much paved them out their own niche as the ticks of Flitterwatt. So our next animal, the Ronziform, also evolved from a Proto-Angliform. It's an ambush predator that lives in Joton reefs and ambushes its prey in a very similar way that eels do on Earth, and that is because it is an anguilliform swimmer. So in case you're interested, this is anguilliform swimming. This is the Roto-Lyster. It evolved from the ancestral Lyster that survived during the transition from Lyster into Laitis. Spongy skin on the animal's back began to harbor rotophytes, which formed a symbiotic relationship very analogous to that of lichen. So the rotophyte gives the animal glucose, and the animal gives it water and shelter and nutrients. Rotophytes are also inside the animal's eggs, and they reproduce asexually to fill the animal's tissues while the animal matures. So this is Elos. It evolved from Jotus monos, to be motile and bilaterally symmetrical. When fish swim by those little hairs on its mouth, it bites them and eats them because it hides under the sand, so it's not so obvious that it's trying to kill you. This is Orus. It also evolved from Jotus monos, and it eats clouds of rotophytes, or algae, and it also eats Roto-Lysters. So it's the closest thing you can find to an omnivore on this planet. This incredibly snake-like limb-driven swimmer is called Lyris, and it evolved from Laitis to eat all types of groups of Protocordons, but namely the smaller ones. This is Lyris, and it also evolved from Laitis. It behaves in much the same way as benthic crabs do, living deep in the ocean and eating little pieces of nutrients that fall from above, which classifies this organism as a benthic detritivore. So, here they are, all the animals we just made. Stay tuned for the next episode when I move these guys onto land. Peace.